Someone you love is going to die. Maybe not today, maybe not for decades, but at some point, you will stand over a body and you will feel the pull to do something with it. You won't want to just leave it there. You'll want to mark the moment, wrap it in cloth, lower it into the ground, put flowers on it, cover it with dirt and say words that feel true, even if you don't know why. That instinct you carry right now, the one that says the dead deserve something, is one of the oldest forces in human history. And the real reason it exists is far stranger than you think. For most of the animal kingdom, death is just biology finishing its business. A wolf falls, scavengers move in, the bones scatter. Life continues without ceremony, without grief rituals, without anything that resembles what you would call meaning. But somewhere in the long corridor of human prehistory, something shifted. Your ancestors started doing something that no other creature had ever done before. They started treating the dead as if they still mattered. The oldest confirmed evidence of deliberate burial goes back roughly 130,000 years. That is the number archaeologists have associated with Neanderthal burial sites in sites like Shanidar Cave in Iraq, where researcher Ralph Selecki and his team in the 1950s and 60s uncovered the remains of several Neanderthals laid in specific positions, surrounded by what appeared to be deliberate placement of bones and stone tools. The findings were controversial. Some argued the arrangement was coincidental. Others saw in those bones something unmistakable, the shadow of ritual, the earliest fingerprint of a mind that understood death as something that demanded a response. But why? What was the first reason? It was not grief. Not in the way you experience it. Not the philosophical, language-soaked grief that fills your chest when someone close to you disappears from the world. The earliest burial behavior was almost certainly more practical than that. Your distant ancestors lived in small bands, close to the land. A decomposing body near your shelter attracted predators. It spread disease. It was dangerous. Moving it, covering it, solved a problem. That is the cold, unglamorous origin of burial. It started as pest control. It started as survival. But something happened on the way to the grave. As your ancestors covered bodies, they started doing more than just covering them. They arranged limbs. They placed objects nearby. They chose specific locations. At the site of Sungir in Russia, dating back around 34,000 years, researchers discovered two adolescents buried head-to-head, draped in thousands of carefully drilled mammoth ivory beads. Over 10,000 beads between them, representing an estimated 10,000 hours of human labor. Someone spent enormous amounts of time and energy decorating the dead. Not for survival, not for safety, for something else, for meaning. That shift is one of the most important transitions in the entire story of your species. The moment your ancestors stopped burying the dead for purely practical reasons and started burying them for symbolic ones, that is the moment you can say the modern human mind had arrived. Archaeologist Christopher Stringer, who has spent decades at the Natural History Museum in London studying the origins of modern humans, argues that behaviors like deliberate burial are among the clearest markers of cognitive modernity. The ability to treat the dead symbolically requires a very specific set of mental tools. It requires the ability to understand that a person who is gone was once a person who was here. It requires memory that extends beyond the immediate moment. It requires an imagination capable of projecting something beyond death, a soul, a spirit, a destination, an afterlife. You cannot bury someone with ceremony unless some part of your mind has wondered what happens next. That wondering is uniquely yours. No other species on Earth has demonstrated a consistent, culture-wide practice of treating the dead as meaningful. Elephants linger near the bodies of their dead and touch them with their trunks. Chimpanzees have been observed carrying deceased infants for days, refusing to let go. Crows have been documented gathering near the bodies of dead crows in what some researchers call proto-mourning behavior. These behaviors are real. They are striking. But they are not burial. They are not ritual. They stop short of the thing your ancestors invented. The deliberate transformation of a dead body into a statement about what life means. Why does that distinction matter? Because the moment your species started burying the dead with intention, it crossed a threshold that changed everything. It started building a relationship with time. When you bury someone, you are saying, this person existed. They existed here, in this place, at this time, and that fact should persist beyond their body. You are creating a record. You are asserting that the past is real and that it matters to the present. Anthropologist Paul Pettit, whose research on Paleolithic mortuary behavior has examined burial sites across Europe and the Near East, argues that deliberate burial represents what he calls the dawn of the human relationship with mortality. The first moment your ancestors began actively managing the emotional and social weight of death within a community. That management was not just emotional. It was political. It was social. Think about what happens in a small group when someone dies and is buried with ceremony. Everyone witnesses it. Everyone participates. The living reaffirm their bonds to each other by collectively honoring the dead. The burial becomes a kind of social glue, a shared ritual that reminds every member of the group that they belong to something larger than themselves. This is why burial practices developed differently across cultures, but always developed. They were solving the same problem everywhere. What do the living do with death? How do they keep a community together when the thing that most threatens community cohesion, grief, fear, the reminder of your own mortality, keeps arriving without warning? The answer your ancestors landed on was ritual. Put the body somewhere. Say something. Mark it. Let everyone watch. Do it the same way every time, so that when the next death comes, there is already a shape for the grief to pour into. You still do this. Your funeral traditions, whatever they are, wherever you come from, are a direct inheritance from that first burial. The specific rituals differ wildly. In some cultures, the dead are cremated. In others, they are placed in the ground facing east. In some traditions, mourners wear black. In others, they wear white. In some places, you feast. In others, you fast. But the structure is the same everywhere. There is a body, there is a gathering, and there is a moment where the community says, in whatever language it speaks, this person mattered. That structure is 100,000 years old at minimum, and buried inside that structure is something else. Something that took much longer for researchers to fully articulate. When archaeologist Francesco De Recco and his colleagues analyzed burial sites from the Middle Stone Age of Africa, they found evidence not just of deliberate placement, but of grave goods. Objects placed with the dead that had no practical value in the afterlife for the obvious reason that there is no verifiable afterlife. Ochre, shells, beads. These objects suggest that your ancestors were not just managing grief. They were imagining something beyond death. They were extending the concept of personhood past the moment of biological termination. That is a staggering cognitive leap. It means that at some point in the deep past, a mind not entirely unlike yours looked at a body that had stopped breathing and decided that the person was still, in some sense, somewhere. That the journey continued, that the beads would be needed, that the ochre meant something on the other side of whatever death was. You have probably never thought of your own belief in an afterlife, or your uncertainty about one, as a biological inheritance. But it may be exactly that. The tendency to imagine that consciousness persists beyond the body is so universal across cultures, so consistent across the fossil record, that some researchers now argue it is a feature of how the human brain is built. Terror management theory, developed by psychologists Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Pyszczynski in the 1980s, and refined across decades of research, proposes that much of human culture, art, religion, achievement, legacy, is built partly as a response to the awareness of death. Your ancestors could not unknow what they had learned. They knew they would die. And so they built systems, burial, ritual, myth, religion, that made that knowledge bearable. Burial was the first of those systems. It was the first technology your species built not to survive physically, but to survive psychologically. That is why it spread. That is why every culture on Earth, without exception, has developed some form of it. Not because some ancient law commanded it, not because a single religion invented it and spread it across the globe, because the human brain, anywhere it is born, arrives with the same weight, the knowledge that this ends. And it needs somewhere to put that weight. It needs a ritual. It needs a grave. It needs the act of lowering something into the earth and saying words that feel true, even when nothing is certain. Tonight, someone somewhere is standing at a gravesite. They are doing exactly what your ancestors did 100,000 years ago in a cave or on a hillside with no language for what they were feeling. They are covering what they cannot bear to leave uncovered. They are marking what they cannot bear to forget. They are performing the oldest human act there is. And somewhere underneath all the flowers and the prayers and the black clothes and the silence, the same ancient mind that first picked up a handful of dirt and made meaning from it. That mind is still doing what it has always done, still insisting that the dead deserve something, still refusing to let go without ceremony. That instinct was never about death. It was always about life and what you do with yours while you still have it.